Okay, so in this video, I'll be talking about why a one crew tree surgery business, the finances are very difficult to actually make work. If you're coming to this video from the previous one where you've seen the three graphs talking about the transition from being a subcontractor or an employee of another business to actually owning your operation, then this will make sense. If you haven't seen that video, then I recommend clicking down below and you'll find a video where I discuss if you are considering starting your own tree surgery operation, why having the end sight of surpassing one crew makes sense, because the finances of a one crew business are very difficult. So today I'm actually going to run through some of the numbers and explain why it's very challenging to make the finances work for a one crew tree surgery business. So in this scenario, we've actually got a relatively lean business. If you've got a yard, you're going to be spending somewhere between 500 and 1,000 a month for your yard. Some of you probably slightly more than that, some of you less. But if you're running one crew, it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark. So you're going to be looking at about 9 grand a year for your yard. If you've got an ARB tipper on finance plus the maintenance, you're probably looking at about 9 grand a year for the finance, about 750 a month. Plus you need about 2 grand a year in maintenance for an ARB tipper. We're going to assume the chipper's owned, which won't be the same for everyone. Some of you will have finance on that. But again, we're going to be looking at about £1,500 a month in maintenance for the chipper as well. You're going to spend about 12 grand a year on fuel. You'll always spend more than you think, especially the cost of fuel at the moment, meaning that that's even more likely. Let's also assume you own all of your tools, but still you're going to be looking at 2 grand a year roughly in maintenance. Things go wrong with saws all the time and trimmers. You're going to be looking at about 500 quid for 2-stroke and bar oil a year. Again, another 500 for chains and bars. Insurance, probably 3.5 grand, including your public liability, up to about £5 million. And then also 500, my mistake, roughly 3,500, including tool insurance and your public liability up to about £5 million. Then also you're going to need an accountant to do your accounts every year, and you're also going to need some sort of software, whether it's QuickBooks or you have a CRM. You're going to be spending about £2,000 a year on software and accountancy. Then you've got the rakes, shovels, ladder racks, things that get lost and broken. You're going to need to account for those. You're going to spend about £1 grand a year on things getting lost, broken, damaged. And then advertising, this is the big one. In order to make a one crew tree surgery business work, you need to consistently have weeks that are fully booked. And in order to do that, word of mouth isn't going to cut it unless you've been in the game for a very long time, or unless you've got a lot of commercial contracts that span longer periods of time. If you're focusing on the domestic market, then you're going to have to advertise. And as a minimum, you need to be spending about £750 a month on advertising. I would recommend more than that, but as a floor, if we say £9,000 a year, these bills all told, you'll notice, don't also account for your quoting vehicle. A lot of you will either own a quoting vehicle in the business outright, and the fuel and the insurance will be on the insurance will be on a fleet, and the fuel will kind of cover that. If you're using a personal vehicle, then I recommend you claim the mileage from the business at 45p a mile. But that's kind of a bit of a muddy area. Some of you are going to be quoting with the truck itself, your ARB tipper. I don't recommend that. It's not very economical, but some of you will. And then some of you are going to have different setups. So we're actually going to ignore that. So this is a very conservative cost of £52,000 a year just for the business to function, just to be able to fulfill the work. Then, of course, you've got yourself, the owner's salary. Now, I would recommend you don't have anything less than 40,000 you're paying yourself. That's still less than you'd be earning if you were a contract climber. The reason being, lots of you are going to go, oh, well, I pay myself £12,000 a year and the rest is dividends, and that's all well and good, but it's completely illegal to pay yourself a dividend if the business doesn't turn any profit. It has to be paid from accrued profits. And so if you have a rough year and you've only paid yourself £1 grand a month, and then it comes to the end of the financial year, you're thinking you're going to top yourself up with dividends, if there's no profits to take those from, you're in a dire situation. And if you ever go and try and finance a vehicle, get approved for a mortgage, or try and rent a place, it just doesn't work. So I think the culture of taking the tax-free allowance and then paying dividends for everything else is a bit of a fetish. I don't think it's actually very practical in the real world. So I would recommend having a salary that fulfills all your bills, pays yourself properly, and then any dividends you take on top of that are really seen as kind of a reward for how well you run your business. So you should be factoring in your own salary into your costs of your business. So A conservative amount is £40,000 a year. That would actually be about 35 take home to you, or sorry, not even take home, that's pre-tax, because there's going to be some national insurance on that. But that's a bit of a separate conversation. But we're looking at about £92,000 a year just for the business to function and run and for you to be paid. And so how that looks in the real world is if you're running 48 weeks a year, so that's 4 weeks off, and 5 days a week you're fully booked. So you've got a team out 5 days a week, revenue producing. You need to produce £425 after your subcontractor costs are deducted to break even. That's zero profit in the business, just to break even. Now, if you just break even at that point, then you are never going to be able to get to a second crew. You're never going to be able to invest in kit, invest in training, bring on staff, because the business it's slowly withering and dying. So you should be running with a healthy margin on top of this. And so at 5 days a week, that is doable. You can add a margin on that and still be competitive. You can run a 3-man day at roughly £1,000, cover those subcontractor costs and still have a profit margin. But that relies on you having consistent work. Lots of you will not consistently have 5 days a week in the diary. You'll probably be doing 4 days a week. Some of you, the occasional week will be even less. And the jump in costs you need to reach for each of those billable days, once you reduce the total days you can bill in a year. So for this one, it's 240. This one, it's around about 190 billable days. You see the jump is significant. It's now £530 you need to cover after your subcontractors have been paid just to break even at 4 days a week. So how well utilised your crews is, how well utilised all of these resources of the business are, is the real make or break with whether the business is actually profitable. And this is why it's so challenging, because you really need to learn the skill of advertising and running a business while also fulfilling the work. And that's why the one crew scenario is quite challenging. And so if you want to break past this point, you need to run a healthy margin. You need to be able to advertise to fulfill 2 crews, and you need to have accrued enough profit over time so that you can fund kind of expanding out to another crew, getting a bigger yard, financing more vehicles, and so you can fulfill that work. So this hopefully will give you a bit of a picture of why the numbers are challenging. A lot of you will have no ideas of what these numbers are. A lot of you will be existing in a guesswork function for the business. But if you take and pay close attention to your numbers, you'll probably realise that by the end of the financial year, when you're looking back, the numbers are nowhere near as good as it might seem. It can be quite an illusion. Oh, we took 200 grand in revenue this year for the business, but actually yourself, you took less than 30 grand once it's all accounted for. So hopefully this has given a little bit more insight into kind of why the one crew tree surgery business model is difficult. It is workable. Arb Launch, this is kind of our specialty, taking businesses in this scenario where they're struggling to pay themselves properly, they're struggling to break past one crew, they're wearing all the hats, it's very hectic, and adding some structure to the business, running the advertising so there's consistent work, and then hopefully breaking past this point. So if you're interested in that, you can click down below and you can head to our website and you can book in a call with myself personally, and I can discuss kind of how we approach this. But failing that, hopefully this has kind of added some clarity to why this is a challenging position. And if you've been thinking and pulling your hair out, why are the numbers not making sense? This is probably why. You need to check how many days are actually utilised inside the business and making use of these expenses that you're paying for. Thank you for watching.